So as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm doing my PhD currently. I've finished my third year. I'm working with Dr. Sarah Bell. We focus on the integration of water systems within the city with green infrastructure for the primary purpose of solving the water shortage issues, but also to enhance the ecosystem services within cities as well. My approach in my PhD is a socio-technical one, in which we try to incorporate social factors into technical decision making. For today, I'm going to just share a little bit about the social part of my research. And I would like to first start with, so as most of you might be aware, the past decade was called the International Decade of Water for Life. And the main purpose of that decade was to try to decrease the amount of lack of access of people to safe and secure water. However, as you know better than me, because water issues are not that necessarily possible to solve within a period of time, so recently it was proposed by the government of Tajikistan to have a new decade called the Decade of Water for Sustainable Development, in line with the SDGs. And it was brought to the General Assembly in September and agreed upon. So this proposal has two main objectives. The first one is that a new international water architecture is needed to make financing and implementation efforts more effective. The second one is that the availability and accessibility of information is vital to the people who want to make a change and need it. Now this, for developing countries, I say this because my case study is based in Tehran, Iran, which is a developing country. The translation for developing countries would be that they need new water management institutions and utilities, better knowledge of integrated water resources management, and the capacity to protect water basins and ecosystems. So this requires access to the best available practices through training and partnerships. Another thing that the proposal doesn't adequately address is the financial needs of such practices. So the reason I brought this into attention is to conceptualize my research within what's going on in the world and is a priority at the moment. As a new water architecture, it's not a new concept, integration within the city between water systems and other things, where I solely focus on water systems and green infrastructure. And the water systems are stormwater management techniques and wastewater reuse practices. And I've chosen this because it could be done locally. These technologies are available and can be implemented locally, so therefore they have short-term benefits that the users could see, as well as having a long-term benefit, which is the sustainability of these techniques. And the other issue is about, well, being local and in smaller scales, the finance is easier, especially in countries such as Iran, where everything is managed, especially in the water sector. It's a monopoly, so it's centralized, and bigger projects are always in favor rather than smaller local ones. So the financing is a bit of an issue there with the bigger projects, therefore the smaller projects can be financed more easier. The other thing in regards to the sustainability of these local projects is the involvement of stakeholders. Again, in research that I've done into projects that have been done recently or previously in Iran, in the ones that there were some failures or they weren't able to reach their maximum efficiency, was the issue of stakeholder involvement. When not all of the stakeholders are consulted or involved from the beginning, when the project becomes into implementation and operation, there are some conflict of interest between different stakeholders. So going into the stakeholder engagement process, this is the sort of guideline that I used from my work. In the water dialogues, there's been an evolution from going from participation towards stakeholder engagement. Participation, a concept being more about individuals taking part into the design, the implementation and evaluation of projects, whereas stakeholder engagement is more a broader sense of involvement, whereas different inputs and sometimes conflicting priorities are brought into the decision-making process. So for my, what we did as a stakeholder engagement process for my PhD is that we held a workshop in Tehran last year. And in order to prepare for this workshop, I followed this analytical framework, whereas we first sought out the drivers of water shortage in Tehran and what's going on, and then we started mapping out the different stakeholders that are involved in this area. Then from there into the workshop and interviews, we've sought out the obstacles and the mechanisms that exist, and further on to the costs and benefits. So just a quick review of what I mean by these local solutions. As I said previously, they're nothing new, so it's the integration of the urban blue, being the wastewater recycling and stormwater management, with the urban green, and sort of having a city that everything is reused and sort of mimics the natural environment itself. The benefits are obvious: flood risk reduction, thermal comfort, runoff, an increase in runoff quality, noise and air pollution reduction, biodiversity, etc. So for this part, we're using a model called UWAT, which is a kind of a demand management model where you can derive the outcome as the benefits of having such a system for the case study. Just a little introduction to Tehran. This gray area is Tehran. What is going on is that, so Tehran, at the moment, there's a plan to have 7 wastewater treatment plants within the city. So far, only one in the south has been made, which is quite unique in the region. It's very modern and big. But the issue with this is that, firstly, not all the city is connected to a network. Only 40% of it is developed up to now, and only 10% of the households have access to the network. The problem is not having enough funding at the moment for this project. The other issue is that Tehran uses a lot of water. A lot of it comes from the dams around the city, but some part of it comes from wells and underground water tables. So sort of bringing all the water down to the south, and then after treating it, extracting it and discharging it for industrial and agricultural purposes, sort of increases the imbalance of the already imbalanced water tables for the city. So what we propose, I'm working on that district up there, which is a relatively good district in the fact that it has a lot of green areas. It's fairly developed. The first map shows the older areas of the neighborhood, but it's a good area to sort of use as a pilot project. The stakeholder engagement, where we identified the different stakeholders involved in water management and green infrastructure in Tehran. The key issues of the characteristics of this management is that, well, I mentioned it's centralized. There are contrasting perspectives and overlapping responsibilities for the management of wastewater, and there's a lack of transparency and trust among some of the stakeholders. So these are some photos of the workshop that we had in Tehran. We were able to engage a lot of relevant stakeholders in a 2-day workshop. Our aim was to establish understanding of the current condition of Tehran and how it manages its water, and then learn about international experience on local integrated management of water and green infrastructure, which was sort of like the desirable step, and then to find a feasible transition pathway from the current to the more sustainable conditions. And we had a few challenges in the process. First was convincing and justifying the need for such a workshop to stakeholders. So we had to bring a lot of incentives for the different stakeholders that we went to in regards to how this will help. And also bringing all relevant stakeholders together in one place and having them present their data, talk on priorities and needs with one another, which was another issue. The third one was keeping the discussion, especially in the workshop, for turning into an opportunity for bringing up previous disagreements. And the outcomes was an analysis of the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats in the case study, and also all through Tehran, and the feasibility of a pilot project with multi-use water services. It also acted as a knowledge-sharing platform that led way for other similar initiatives. Afterwards, there was a group, because this was held in the university, there was a group that followed this initiative, and they started a pilot project as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have any quick questions for Atiyeh? Raymond?
Given that you have organized this multi-stakeholder process and all the challenges we've heard, is there any tentative conclusions from your side who would be a key stakeholder? Do you look more at, say, the utilities or public utilities? Do you look more at potential investors eventually coming from vulnerable industries downstream? So what is a key actor in this governance area?
Yes, well, the key actor at the moment is the Ministry of Energy, which, yes, the Ministry of, so Iran has a Ministry of Energy which deals with water and power, electricity. And so they are the ones that mainly decide for how water is distributed and then collected as wastewater within the city. I've heard recently, I would like to take some credit for what we did, that they have recently proposed circular planning to have local solutions at the moment to solve the issue with wastewater. So they are the main people. I started off as wanting to have more end users involved in the process. However, that's a very difficult thing at the moment. We still need to, as previous presenters and discussed as well, we first need to solve the issue among the decision makers in the hierarchy, and then, thank you.
I'm going to take Chair's prerogative and ask a question. I think so, maybe moving on from that, do you see, what do you think is the potential and some of the barriers from moving from that big infrastructure kind of solution approach, so the big projects with the big investment compared to the more decentralised approaches?
Yes. Well, there's one opportunity at the moment because the project is at some kind of a halt at the moment, so we can use the infrastructure that is already there for the purpose of our local initiatives. That helps. However, there's always, the issue is that there's always a lot of authorities involved, whereas necessarily you can't always get everybody's attention and approval at the same time. So you might go on with this, and at some point they will come and say, like the city council will come and say, well, we don't approve of this. And it's hard to sort of understand how the system works because it's a bit overlapped and in that sense clouded. But
Okay, great. Thank you.